Hello, I would like to welcome the senior programmer for short films at the Sundance Film Festival. He's also a filmmaker, a punk rock enthusiast, and a champion of film. And I would probably say like short films in particular, Mike Plante. Hi, Mike, how's it going?
Good, good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing very well given the circumstances, and thank you so much for joining us. Here at Argo, where we champion, short filmmakers, I do want to have a conversation with you, not only about like the process of Sundance Film Festival and how you pick films, but also kind of your journey and what you look for in shorts, being that you are so kind of well versed in, I would say, the form over many years. So I would like to perhaps start at the beginning, if that's all right with you. And I don't necessarily mean an entire life story, but would you mind briefly talking about perhaps like your career trajectory and what got you into film programming, ultimately arriving at the Sundance Film Festival?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in general, I'm like anyone else where I grew up with movies and actually going to the drive-in a lot just because we were working class and didn't have much money. But so we'd see films every weekend. I was always wondered, like, how are they made? I was really interested into getting into it as an art form in some form or fashion. Eventually I go to college, and one of the classes I took in Tucson at the University of Arizona was to work for the local Arizona Film Festival. And it was great because it was so tiny. I was able to learn how to be a projectionist. I was able to learn how booking films works. I did popcorn, ticketing. And because it was a small staff, I got to learn all these different things. And that eventually just gave me some connections. I also worked at a video store, worked at a movie theater. And so after about 10 years of doing that on the small scale, I just started meeting people at other festivals and got a tech job at Sundance. That was like 3 months long. And then at that point, I had done a lot of other things. I had made a lot of short films just because of film school. And also I had a film zine. I was doing these other things, but eventually I could talk about film. I could work with a group. I understood about like why you show some stuff and not other stuff. And I just had the crazy stamina to watch a ridiculous amount of movies in a short time. So it worked out where it was just three of us in 2002. I started in 2001 for the 2002 festival. 2002, I started helping out program the shorts. And I've had a bunch of other jobs, of course, along the way. But since then, I've continued to make documentary films on the side when I can. And then Sundance, we have a heavy part of the year where we watch everything. Now it's up to, what do we have this year? I think 8 short film programmers, and I'm one of them, and I run the program year round.
And so you clearly, from when you started, helped that program grow, correct? Like in terms of, obviously, I just think in size, like you said, it was started with 3, now you're at 8. Can you kind of perhaps also talk about that process? I mean, what do those 8 programmers, you do for the festival? What does that kind of work look like in the deciding of the films?
Yeah, I think in general, our job is to get through all the submissions and identify what could possibly play the festival. So if you submit a short to the Sundance Film Festival, one of the professional short film programmers will see it. And we make a judgment if it could possibly play. It's kind of, look, I'd love to say we're geniuses and or we have some agenda. You can see the agenda on my wall of like what a film has to have. It's really like it's up to, we watch them as an audience. I hit play. I don't know who made it. I don't know if I'm supposed to laugh or cry or think. I don't even know if it's a documentary or a fiction. And then I have an honest response as an audience member as to how this film works. So hopefully that doesn't become intimidating what could possibly play Sundance. It's more just like, does this film work on its own terms? Whether you're supposed to laugh or it's serious, etc. And then we put it into a small group and we put it on a list, and then all 8 of us will watch all of those films. At the end of the day, we're talking about almost 10,000 shorts are submitted every year. Wow. We do watch every single one. It's just that it takes us 6 months to do it. We just take a long time, and thankfully they're short. And then it's probably about 500 are rising to the top. And then we just make programs, and it's very much about like what film can play first, what can play last, what can play in between those, what makes our program. So if something is amazing, it's going to get in somewhere. But there's also a lot of these films that are like, oh, well, this film plays great between these other two films. And we do like all the films, but that's how we program. We try to make how the audience is going to experience it.
Right.
So it's a little nuanced, but I would, because there's 8 of us and we all have different backgrounds and it's a very diverse group, we don't have the same opinions. We don't argue really at all. I mean, it's often more just like, I think this film is interesting, but do my colleagues who I trust like it? What do they think about it? Are there, is it actually funny if it's a comedy? Some stuff like that. And it actually works out. It takes a while, but it works out kind of smoothly that way.
Yeah. I mean, I think to your point, I think that's what's so important, going back to that fact of having like diversity of thought also like in the room, like from backgrounds and ideas, because to your point, like film's very subjective, right? So what might move me might not move you. And then being able to talk about it, I think is so important because, I do want to get back to that comment though that you made about like, look at this agenda I perhaps have behind me, because I know I get asked that a lot, and I'm sure you must a lot, from a programming perspective of like, what is the trick? What can I do that is the film that gets into Sundance, for example? So perhaps could I like phrase a question more around like, what are aspects of a short that stand out to you? Because I don't really think there's a formula, but what is some things that actually stand out to you?
I wish there was just like a formula, and then you're just like, oh, they had 1, but they didn't have 2. So we got to be so. I often think about if I had a different path, I could just be a car mechanic, because then it's just like you have an engine and it works or it doesn't work, and if something's broken, here's the piece. And then when you get to, I'm saying stuff that's pretty obvious, but it's really fascinating when you sit around and talk about art. Like our job is also like, I should say we have 2 things. Where are we serving the filmmaker in some sort of way? Are we giving them a good platform? Which means literally a good projection and also the way they're seen. And do we connect them with industry? And then also, we just have film fans showing up. Are they going to enjoy stuff? Is there stuff that I think I've seen a million times, but it's going to play good? And we have to consider those things quite a bit, but it's not for or against the film. So coming back from that, like, okay, it's as simple as, is a comedy funny? Not that everyone will like it, but is it actually funny? That's the easiest thing. If there is a motivation that's implied by a short film, are they fulfilling that? If you have a very small drama about a breakup, is it handheld camera work? Does that fit? And if they make a choice that we didn't expect, does that choice work? So we don't want to say that like, well, you use this kind of camera work or you use this kind of an actor, and that's wrong or right, but what does it serve if it's supposed to be? And we do show some stuff that's very straight, very much like, I don't want to have this come off wrong, but a film like if somebody did a war film, there's some expectations you've got to fulfill. I should say, if you make a sci-fi short, do I believe this world is real? That kind of stuff. You do have to fulfill that. But if you do it really lo-fi and it all happens, with no quote unquote budget, like that still might be great. It may be a time travel film and you just told us these things were happening, but do we trust that? Does it work within the world you create? So I hope that's a good answer, because it's so interesting the way we have different reactions to something, and then we have to really discuss, is this on purpose, if it's kind of an interesting choice, whether it's the style or the story. And on a simple value, sorry, real quick, on the simple value, it's like, sometimes films have great writing and really bad acting, and sometimes that film doesn't work. And sometimes there's a lot of money put into a movie, but again, bad acting, or it's 10 minutes longer than it is a successful length, then that's an aspect that doesn't work for that particular film.
But to your point, I want to maybe perhaps double down on that motivation, like that thing that you're saying, because I absolutely agree to that world that is created, whether sci-fi or not. It needs to be believable in some way, like to that motivation. And so it sounds like it's more about like it's like the potential is that if the potential is there, then it doesn't have to be perfect, but it is like all motivated by the right things. And that's very hard to tell a filmmaker. Like that's the key, like to your to unlocking what would be a great short, correct? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Potential is a great word that I'm going to steal from now on because what is the potential of this film, of the story, of the style? And, you know, we spend a lot of time breaking down myths because if you don't see everything we show, which is a lot of stuff over all these decades, you're going to see a few films and you'll be like, that's a Sundance film. And people so often are just like, well, you know, I'm sure they do at the All Fest. That film is so San Francisco. That film is so New York. And I even might think that, but you know, what does that mean? I don't even know. And Sundance is the same way. People sometimes are just like, oh, that film didn't cost anything. You're like, yes, that's it doesn't matter if something costs a lot or not. That just doesn't matter to us. Does it play well? And did they mean to make it that way? Same thing with the talent involved. Sometimes it is about like, you know, if you watch this film alone, a certain short alone, you're like, that played Sundance, you may put too much weight on it. The same way we hear when something wins an award. And I even do that. You come in, I sometimes have to not watch a film until I forget about everything I heard about it, a short or a feature. Because I'll show up to it like this won that award, this has this famous person in it. And it's just not fair to the film. But a lot of films show talent and we want to help that talent get to the next level or whatever they want to do as well.
Right. And that's what's really great, I think, about film festivals and that discovery to, you know, to that end, which, you know, maybe perhaps going back to also the point of, you know, I was really curious about how you were talking about how a program almost like also comes together, right? Like a short will be great, but then how it plays together. And that makes me think about trends, but not perhaps them just like, you know, being asked like, what's the trend? Let me make that movie for it. I want to look at it more from like looking backwards almost. Again, given your year's experience, I'm just curious because you've programmed, you know, for many years and, you know, recognizing that motivation and potential. Could you talk about like, what are some of the trends and moments that, you know, stood out for you, I would say in the last couple of years, if you could touch on?
Yeah, I think in general, we were talking a little bit earlier, and it was interesting how when you saw the advent of video, then a lot more people started making shorts. But the greatest thing is with the advent of the internet, people started making better shorts. And I think the world of short documentary has just gotten so fascinating. And part of that is for very obvious civil rights issues, which is great, you know. Did this thing happen? I don't know, but here's a video of it. Here's somebody who was there talking about it. I could read an article about it. I could hear someone talk about it, but it's something else to see it, and it's something else to see somebody talking about it rather than getting it from another way, another art form. And I think so, but I think the documentary world's gotten a lot better. And I think, you know, just the idea of what you can do with a short has, I think, I'm guessing, but I think people have just started to realize how much of an specific art form it is. So we see filmmakers trying to do something in shorts rather than trying to make a feature. And I mean that as a good thing. So even when I was in high school, God, even when I was in college in the 90s, so brutal. Even when I was in college in the 90s, you made a short because you wanted to get a job or you wanted to go to a studio or you wanted to make something else. And the trend in the last 5-10 years has been, I want to make a short because I have a short story to tell. And that's just great. I mean, that's, you know, or maybe it is to try stuff out, but it's not so, that idea of amateur versus professional is just ridiculous, you know, whether or not, you know, it all comes down to, you know, sports really. So, which I like, but it's like, no, it's not like you're in college, so you're an amateur. Like, well, it doesn't have anything, or somebody paid you to make a film, that thing may still not be good. Are you not an amateur? That stuff's all silly and weighs down on people too much, unfortunately, who are trying to make a film. But what we've seen more than anything else the last 5 years is that people understand that the short film is a specific type of film and art form and fulfilling that in a good way.
And I would also say Sundance has been really good and feels like very much on the forefront of like those trends, in the sense, to your point, of even like distribution changing for shorts. Like, could you talk about how the fact that shorts, it doesn't matter if they're online, for example, to also play your festival? And I think that some filmmakers now still get a little caught up on what being in a streaming platform or like in a digital distribution space, and then but also playing festivals. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, we never, again, when I started in 2001 and two, it's pre-YouTube, so it just wasn't even an issue. And so
Right.
it's just never had, like, we just want to show the best films we can. We're super fortunate that if we show a short, people probably think we showed it first anyway. So it's like, people, nobody's watching that closely, and that's great for us. And so something's online, unless it's an incredibly famous person who's in it and it's got 10 million views, that's kind of the only time we just be like, well, what are we doing for this short? We can help out somebody else better. So we showed one short that was online, and it had 100,000 views, but the 8 of us had never seen it. And it ended up winning our best US short award while it was on YouTube the whole time.
Wow.
So we're not affected by that. And I think most festivals are not. I know it's up in the air whether or not you get competitive when it starts getting into the top tiers, but that's too bad, because that's a leftover, that's a carryover from what features have to go through. What we want is someone to come to Sundance, see films they like, for us to help talent to get going. And I mean, I don't know how you feel, but like, do you even think about, oh, the first time I saw that short was X, Y, and Z? Or was
Yeah,
it?
I have. You mean in terms of like my own personal reaction to it?
Yeah. I mean, do you remember where you saw shorts first?
Yeah, usually I do. And yet I will say this, because again, knowing that we both program, and the theatrical experience being very different than the online space, but like also allowing them to both coexist, right? Like that it's very different to sit down, I think, with an audience of 50 to 300 people, depending on the size of your theater, and watch a shorts program together. To your point, that's curated in terms of like a feeling, or meant to take you on a journey, and then or watching it at home, which I also think is like really valid, and I'm just by myself and I can still get scared by like a great horror short, and maybe that's even worse than I'm by myself. So yeah, it is interesting. I do remember where I've seen great shorts and where they have
And that's a great point too, like that I'm sure all of us programmers talk about. What does it mean to see this with 200 other people? Versus, I mean, only obviously this year is very different, where we do have to wonder, like, somebody's gonna be watching this at home. What if they look away? What if they have the lights on? That's all such a new world for
right.
us personally as an event. We have to start thinking about that. It didn't really make us show or not show something, but it's like, all right, well, we want to make sure everybody has a good experience, audience, filmmaker alike. And to see, we've always just been lucky. We're like, people are gonna see this 40 feet wide with loud sound. And if it's, how people are going to react in a room really affects a comedy, horror, like you're saying, stuff like that.
Well, so going back to kind of the filmmaker, perhaps like advice for those that are, maybe chiming in to hear, your thoughts again with that, kind of extensive experience. And you maybe touched on this a little bit, but I'd love you to talk about kind of some of the pitfalls that you perhaps often see, like maybe some top level advice you would give filmmakers of things to avoid.
The main thing is going to be wishy-washy, but it's, don't make something just because it's popular. Often somebody wants to, I mean, if you want a job in the film industry, there's a certain way to go about that. And perhaps like if you want to make a Marvel movie, like, maybe you should make something that replicates that in order to get work. But we just see it fail so many times because it implies a level of production value. It implies a level of acting that may cost money you don't have, simple stuff like that. I think, I say it, and anytime, if you see any of our talks or anything, we talk about the backyard. I mean, you should do what's in your backyard. What's the easiest thing to do? Why would you make this any more difficult than it needs to be? To make a film is tough enough, much less to make a great film. So what's the easiest thing? so often somebody thinks it's boring to them, something in their life, something in their area that is unique to where they live, and they think it's boring. It's like, it's really interesting to us and everybody outside of that. And that should just really be championed. And, sometimes we know somebody that started making shorts because they wanted to do stunts. They ended up being really good at it. That was their backyard. That was awesome. And that was Nash Edgerton and Joel Edgerton. And things worked out fine for them, but they really just wanted to do a bunch of stunts. Ends up, they told some good stories and ended up making really good films. For them, that comes easy. For all of us, it was really interesting.
Right.
Other pitfalls, I think, are just like, if you're going to write some difficult dialogue, that's your actors have to pull it off, or it doesn't matter how good of a writer you are.
Yeah.
Your camera work, your motivations inside your film should be, make sense for the film, and if not, why? And the biggest pitfall is, this is also wishy-washy, but just like, if you're going to spend money, what does it get you? Money just doesn't make a good film. And I'm sure people hear that, but it's fascinating, even with shorts. Like, oh, I'm going to spend a lot of money, this thing's going to be good. It's so difficult. Really make sure that you're spending money for a good reason. Like paying your cast and crew, like feeding people, not just, oh, I have to get a better camera. Like, who's running that camera?
Right. That makes a lot of sense. No, those actually weren't wishy-washy at all. I think those are actually really good points for anyone that's perhaps, again, looking at this for that type of advice. And you see a lot of films. I mean, what did you say? Did you say the number and I forgot it already? How many shorts were submitted to Sundance this year?
It was a little over 9,800.
Right. Yeah. And how many were ultimately chosen for the program for the 2021 event?
This year, because for 2020, for a normal year, we can show up to 80, which is kind of just budgetary purposes, because you give them, you help them out and with travel a little bit, so it ends up being monetary costs connected to it. Because of COVID, we're doing 50 this year, so it's a rock solid program.
Oh, absolutely.
And every year, though, out of 500, we try to contact people that don't get in, just to make sure we know. I try to share it with other festival programmers that are like, hey, this thing's great. Not telling you how to do your job, just here's something to watch that we couldn't show, and I want to try to help folks out. I'm sure you see way more films than you could possibly program too that are good.
Oh, I that actually leads into my other question, because again, it's more like, I think just because you get a rejection letter doesn't mean your film is bad. And that is, the unfortunate, I think, that comes when you get a no, like, as a no is an answer. And so I'm curious, perhaps from your perspective of like, what advice would you give like filmmakers that, again, there are of films that you obviously really liked or not, but just in general that didn't get into Sundance? Because I know it's a very, prestigious festival that a lot of filmmakers wanted to get into.
It's just, I've been rejected so many times by friends, by festivals like I've gone to 20 times. It's like, they know what works for their program. I've been accepted by a few fests that I had no connection to at all. And it's just like, wow, this is just random, and I don't know what every festival needs. And it's the same thing. It's like, unfortunately, whatever you make is just, you're entering it into a very competitive, to say one thing's better than another is just so tricky. We do know what things could work with our audience. And I know with 9,800, you end up seeing, oh, wow, you're one of 5 films. I know you think you're the only one with a story, but it's crazy. 5 people made that story and you cannot believe it. Because we're all sitting there, we're just like, how are there, even last year, we're like, how do we have 3 films about goats? Like, why is it the goat year? This year is the turtle year. It's like, what is going on? Why is there 7 films about turtles this year and never again? And so for us you would never know that, and you don't get in, and it's tough. The best advice is, you are a filmmaker if you're making films. And it's a bit of a game to get them seen, unfortunately. But it doesn't mean you're not a filmmaker. It doesn't mean you made something bad. It's just a very competitive environment with us and every other festival. And in the real world with features, and distributors can only buy so much and put out so many things, and that gets into more of a monetary thing. But I think as long as you're making stuff, you are a filmmaker.
Oh, absolutely. Um, we only have time for a couple, more questions. It's this time just seemed to have flown by. And so I kind of want to end on more just like a general feeling around your kind of ethos around shorts, as an art form, as like a relevant art form, as, an opportunity to really like get across ideas in a short amount of time. So could you talk about just perhaps in general, why you think that the short film is so important?
And I think the issue that filmmaking has that other arts don't have is it's connected to box office and therefore popularity through commerce, which is unfortunate. Where you do have this in the art world, if something's sold for a certain amount of money, then it's more important. But there's also so much art that just like, well, a lot of people like it, that's why it's good.
Mm-hmm.
And short films are stuck by by those handcuffs that feature films have. How much did it cost? How many people saw it? Did you make money? When I wish that like people would realize, and I think they are, again, because of the internet, because there's simply more access to see films and there's more audiences and you see shorts easier now. People are realizing, oh, the way I love a song, that's 3 minutes. And it's influenced, like, makes me happy or sad or just influenced my entire day or week. It's the same sort of power. The way a poet is understood to be a very professional and serious type of artist, like somebody making shorts, and I'm sure you do too. So many filmmakers that only make short films, or they make a feature, then they make a short film. And that's not, you're still a filmmaker, you're still, an artist of a kind, but you understand that some stories, oh boy, some stories should not be 2 hours long. And, do you mix up when you're programming? Do you go back and forth between features and shorts, or do you just try to watch a bunch of one in a row?
It also depends. I think if I were to say, like, honestly, I'm a programmer that's also led by the type of mood I'm in, but I actually like to go back and forth in the same way that maybe I'll use the example, because even if it was short length or feature length, it's more I go back and forth between tone. So I don't like watching a lot of nonfiction work can feel very draining because of just you are taking in a lot of overwhelming, I would think, oftentimes stories or experiences or circumstances. And so you want to then like provide some levity. So to me, it's more, oh, I now I want to look to a comedy. Now I want to be kind of, brought back to a center of, oh, right, the good in the world that, and like and being able to balance that. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily just watching short length versus the feature length, but I do like and lucky within my programming to do both. So yeah, it goes back and forth. I would say for yourself, because I know you obviously have interest in feature, you just happen to oversee the shorts program at Sundance.
Yeah, I'll only watch shorts, but then I'll get called in on a feature that's usually avant-garde and weird. Say, well, dude, if you don't like this, I don't know, like, and it's not like I'm deciding if something gets in or not, but that's the way programming works. Like, you should like this. If you don't like this in our team, we got some problems because we all appreciate it.
Right.
So I'll get called in a little bit of features, and then I'll guest program, or I have the side gigs where for smaller regional festival I'll do, which is great because it's just a smaller workload, and do features there. Regional programming's great too. Understand that Sundance does a lot of things and connects people with the industry, and it's a much larger platform. But to do something, I worked for the Provincetown Film Festival for a while. I help out a festival in Tucson a lot, because I used to live there, and just like, we know what films we like, but what will really resonate in this community, and that's like so great. Features and shorts, it's just really it's even a smaller, I shouldn't say smaller, but just a quicker connection with an audience that's specific. I love doing that.
Yeah, and I think that's where, again, kind of within the context of Argo and what we're what's being trying to be built it's really interesting, because in some ways it's that same way of like knowing the audience and curating the space still. And I still think that that's so important, whether it is online or in the physical space, to your point, like might not be for like this Sundance community, but for filmmakers to really seek out those places that, see their work as value for that community is really important. And that, with, of course, I'm sure everyone watching wants their film to get into Sundance, and you get that a lot, but that there's also, maybe that's not the be all and end all for everyone too.
Yeah, it's obviously with my films, like, yeah, I like to play Cannes, like, why is that? Well, I think a lot of people will see it. That's why I want to get into a big festival. Like, I made a film. It would be great if people could see it. Be awesome if they like it, but like, let's just get it. How can I have people I don't know see a film I made? And I can't choose that path, and I'm always surprised by that path. I've had things play in very tiny festivals and just get so much response from that. Maybe 30 people saw it, but people liked it and they saw it, like, oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's another bit of advice, which is probably obvious, but for filmmakers, like, if just have reasonable expectations. If a group of people see your film and like it, that's great. If you get caught up in how many see it, I mean, it's especially like you put something on the internet, man, no one may watch it. You need a platform that will help bring an audience. That's why festivals work. That's why online platforms work. Mm-hmm. You need this connector that is going to bring an audience to a film and vice versa. And that's so important. And it's getting better every day with the internet and just with, with technology. It's just easier kind of to see stuff. And that's, that's fortunate for filmmakers and audiences.
Yeah. I was going to try and wrap this up with like final advice, but you kind of just gave it. So I don't want to maybe perhaps then like, oh, is there anything more? But, if you do have any kind of final words to this and thinking about the future of short filmmaking, and you as a filmmaker yourself and someone that's seen a lot of short films, any kind of final words to that or something to be on the lookout for? I'll pass the mic to you.
I mean, the two things I would say is, like, what's great about the internet is that you can take chances. Both as a filmmaker, you can be really risky in what you make in a short film, because hopefully you don't owe people money for making it, and you can do it with a smaller crew. So you can take a real risk. And then also watching stuff, like, just watch as much as you can. But I also say, just specifically because let me know if you don't agree, but I think people should work at film festivals and movie theaters if you can. I know it's a niche job, and it may not be available in every city, but to understand how these, especially if you're a filmmaker, do you know how projection works, how sound works in a theater? Do you know what it means for an audience to react? And from behind the scenes, it's really fascinating how much you can learn about just storytelling and, besides the obvious technical stuff. And you learn a lot about the art form from the exhibition side. I don't know, would you advise people that way?
Again, I like how you're throwing the mic back to me, but I'll take it. I will say that I actually also suggest that, but because I'm not a filmmaker myself, my art is in a different medium, but from a programming and a curatorial standpoint, I often tell actually filmmakers and a lot of people that are, coming up in film school, or if they want like to understand the medium that they're working in and to actually understand the market that they want to kind of enter into, I was like, you should go volunteer review at a film festival, because there are obviously, I think, over 900 film festivals in the US alone. And that experience, to your point, go and watch, 150 short films that are just blindly submitted and, from anywhere and around the world. And you're going to be so surprised, I think, from like, one, what you're perhaps drawn to. I think you're going to be able to point out, I always like to use the, anecdote of like, you'll know when the sound is bad. Like, you'll know when, like, and it's not fixable, right? It's not something that it's like the film wasn't done. It's just like was poorly, production wise, didn't actually, and so you're taken out of the film, and all of those moments to reflect on when you're making your movie. So, yeah, I give that same advice, but it's also, I don't know if a lot of people have, to your point, the stamina that I would say we both do to kind of to get through so much, but also I think it's like a joyful experience for the most part. But
it's a lot like watching YouTube and you don't get to pick any of the clips. And it's just like, you know, that's, oh, how bad could that be? It's just like, it'd be great if it was only animal videos, like cute puppies all day.
Right. But at
But
the
no,
same time, you're just seeing, you're also seeing what I would say the, you know, again, I always kind of think about it too, like the stories are have been told. They are, the stories of the human condition have all been explored, and yet people are still trying to find something new. And when they do, when they explore it in a different way, when they expose something or capture like a moment that you're like can relate to, but it's in a completely different country or experience that you're like so removed from, but it feels very close to you, you're like, that moment makes all the other things that you watch worth it. It's like, oh, it's what I keep telling myself.
yeah,
Um,
film is a gift.
yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. Well, Mike Plante, thank you so much for joining us today. This was, I think, a very lovely conversation. I hope you had fun, and
Oh, yeah.
just really appreciate your time and, you know, thoughtful work that you put into obviously putting together a program. So congratulations. Very excited to see it
Thanks.
coming up at the end of January. And I think those are, you know, 50 films and filmmakers that we should all be excited to discover. And, you know, if it's their first film or maybe their, you know, third or fourth, you know, really just see the new work that they have in store for us. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Thanks so much. I hope people like them. And as long as you give all the films a chance, it'll be great for everyone. So yeah, thanks for talking to me.